Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate Day number 564, Sunday, September 30th, 2018. Thank you so much for tuning in. My apologies for yesterday not getting the video up to about noon, but YouTube was performing maintenance yesterday and it slowed down the processing time of my video. It was uploaded, but then it has to go through a processing situation, and when YouTube's performing maintenance, everything just doesn't do anything. So anyway, it kind of delayed the upload. But anyway, we got her up there, and hopefully you saw yesterday's video. But let's get into today's video. A lot to talk about. Rand Paul wants an investigation into who published the private telephone numbers of Lindsey Graham, Mike Lee, and Orrin Hatch. The IP address associated with the leak was located in the House of Representatives, and Rand Paul says they should find out who it was and they should be charged. Now, since this story broke, there's been some rumors. They're narrowing down who in the House of Representatives this may have come from. And the rumors are out there now that it came from someone in the office of Maxine Waters, Mad Max. It looks like someone in the office of Mad Max, maybe Mad Max herself, published the private telephone numbers of Lindsey Graham, Mike Lee, and Orrin Hatch. I imagine they'll continue to look into that. And if this turns out to be true, Mad Max should be censored and probably charged. Well, as you know, I reported to you last week that the House Judicial and Oversight Committee was going to subpoena several people, including Comey and some others, back again, including Yates and some others. Glenn Simpson was on that list. So they contacted him, and of course, as I reported to you, his attorney on his behalf said, nah, Glenn Simpson said he ain't coming back. Oh yeah? Looks like Glenn Simpson was just slapped with a subpoena. Slapped with a subpoena to come back and testify so they can get to the truth. Because there's a whole lot of lies that he told the last time he came in and testified. Or was interviewed, or whatever you want to call it, deposed. Whatever you want to call it, the last time he spoke with an investigative committee in the Congress, he lied a lot. That's why he doesn't want to come back. But he's been slapped with a subpoena. We'll see what he does now. So the FBI, the Federal Bureau of I'm With Her, has already started contacting some of these witnesses or people regarding the allegations made by Professor Ford. It appears that they have already made contact with Deborah Ramirez, and it appears that she will cooperate. Now, she was the second accuser who claims that Kavanaugh stuck his pecker in her face. We'll see what else she has to say. I'm guessing not much. A top FBI official has told the New York Times that the investigation can be done easily in a week. Because in this particular article, the article was designed to push the new Democratic line, which is, and talking point, which is that, oh, we can't conduct this investigation in a week, and there could be more allegations that come out. Of course there'll be more allegations that come out. But apparently the FBI isn't interested. They're only interested in what they were told that they were supposed to look at, which is what is on the table now. Not allegations that will drop this week or next week or any other week. And they are telling the New York Times that, no, there's no problem getting this investigation done in a week. I mean, there's only 5 people to talk to, 5 or 6. Kavanaugh, Ford, the 3 people that Ford said could be her witnesses, who all contradicted her testimony, and of course, Deborah Ramirez. I doubt they're going to waste any time on any of the other 3 allegations because they're so ludicrous. We have Mr. Potato Head, John Brennan, having to get his 2 cents in. So he goes on and attacks Kavanaugh. He says, quote, "His partisanship and temperament are disqualifying of a SCOTUS seat." You know, Mr. Potato Head, if I were you, I'd be paying a lot more attention to my own situation. Because there are some dark clouds gathering in the distance, Mr. Potato Head. And they're soon going to be raining all over you. And the last thing on your mind will be worrying about Supreme Court Justice Brad Kavanaugh, who just may be in a position on the court to have something to say about your future. And Sing Sing, you better lawyer up, Mr. Potato Head. Lawyer up. And shut up. No one cares what you think. How come Christina Ford's Stanford University biography page was altered 10 days before the hearing? Why do you think they altered Professor Ford's bio page at Stanford 10 days before her hearing? Anybody want to take a wild guess? It appears also that there is no records in California in their database to prove that Ford is even a doctor or a practicing physician in the state of California. Yeah, well, I pretty much had heard that she's got a PhD in psychology, but she's not actually a practicing physician. She's primarily a teacher and a researcher and an activist, but not a physician. Big difference between having a PhD in psychology and being a physician. You have to have a medical license. You have to pass the medical board. Apparently, according to the records in California, she is not a practicing physician in the field of psychology. She's practicing some other things, though. I can assure you of that. The very last person that Jeff the Flake talked to before asking for the FBI investigation was Rod Rodenstein. Rodenstein Joe Manchin is in deep, deep trouble. He is now tied with Morrissey at 45%. Keep in mind, Trump has a 57% approval rating in West Virginia, and he won that state by like 40 points. Joe Manchin has been pretty popular in West Virginia. But he is facing a very, very difficult challenge. And if he doesn't vote for Brad Kavanaugh, he's done. He might be done anyway. But if he doesn't vote for Kavanaugh, he's absolutely going to be done. 100% toast. And he knows it. Do you think that the Democratic Party will be able to put enough pressure on him to say, hey, Joe, you're going to have to take one for the team. You're going to have to withhold your vote from Kavanaugh. Yes, you're going to lose your election as a result, but don't worry. Uncle George has a big fat bank account. And he'll find a place for you in the organization. But working in the Soros organization may have certain financial benefits, but it's not a U.S. Senate seat. Manchin wants to keep his Senate seat. He likes being a senator. There's a lot of fringe benefits. Sure get a lot of chicks, huh? Free stamping privileges. Get your own spokesman. An office budget, staffers, free limousine rides, great retirement package. Manchin wants to hold on to that seat. He's going to be feeling a lot of pressure from both sides of the coin. And again, I think that with the race with Morrissey closing up now to dead heat at 45%, both of them, and Trump having a 57% approval rating and having won that state by over 40 points, I honestly don't think Manchin can win this thing now. He would need to be up by 10 points right now for me to feel comfortable saying he's probably going to hold the seat. Not anymore. I don't know if it matters if he votes for Kavanaugh or not at this point. I don't think that voting for Kavanaugh is really going to help him that much with Republicans, because Morrissey would do the same. It could only hurt him with Democrats. So I'm not really sure how you roll the dice on that one. And if he were up by 10 points, it would probably be something he would sweat bullets over. But when he's sitting at 45%, he's probably going to have to do some intensive polling to find out where that's coming from and where he's lacking and where he can make it up, if he can make it up. Either way, Joe Manchin is sweating. And if I was a betting man tonight, I would bet Manchin loses. And they've been trying to knock him out for a very long time. He's managed to get reelected there, even though it's a fairly strong Republican state. But he's, generally pretty well liked by a lot of people. And he's a likable guy. I mean, Joe Manchin is a likable individual. And he's pretty much a straight talker, and he has a lot of good qualities. I mean, I'd love to see him flip parties, but he'd have to change his voting habits. But the problem with Manchin is when it comes down to the vote, he always sides with the Democrats. So he goes back home and he talks like a conservative Democrat, says a lot of things that sound good, sounds like he's got some common sense, but when the pressure's on in D.C., he gets back on the plane, gets back to D.C., he folds like a cheap suit and votes for the Democrat liberal agenda. That's why he has to be stopped, and I believe he will be. In fact, as I'm doing this video right now, Trump is in West Virginia doing a rally, and I understand it's sold out. And of course, he's doing the rally on behalf of Patrick Morrissey. And there was a story today of an anonymous someone high up at the Republican National Committee, someone pretty high up, and this particular reporter was contacting them to get feedback about what they thought about Jeff Flake and his performance in the Senate on Friday. And according to this report, this GOP official, who's not being named, but it's a high-level GOP official, the Republican National Committee, said that everyone there at the RNC is furious with Flake. Furious. And they even put in here a quote from this high-ranking person at the RNC that he says that Flake obviously has lost his effing mind. He's sweating bullets right now, even though he's not running for re-election. He does plan on doing something after leaving Congress. Maybe he'll become a Democrat and run for governor or something. Who knows? But I would say his political future does not look bright, because if he thinks that the Democrats are going to welcome him with open arms, he's badly mistaken. They've used him for what they needed him for, and now he'll be kicked to the curb. The Democrats aren't going to welcome Jeff the Flake into their party no more than they welcome Bernie Sanders into their party. Michael Moore, whose recent movie was a massive flop, is now being sued by his ex-wife, and it's getting pretty ugly. She says that he stiffed her out of profits. Well, probably the only thing he could stiff her out of. They got divorced in 2014. Now, they've been married like 20-something years. 21, 22, 23 years, something like that. Now, apparently, she works with him on these past movies. A producer role, executive producer role, things like that. So she's apparently been part of his business career making these movies. So she's not like the stay-at-home wife. She actually is very involved in the making of all these movies and is involved in that way. And therefore, I guess feels that she deserves something more than what she's been getting or has gotten. And so that's coming up in these court hearings. And she's saying that he owes her a lot of money, that he stiffed her out of a lot of profits. Of course, the fact that his last movie just bombed, he'll probably lose, I don't know how many millions on it, but it only made $3 million the first weekend. He might end up making another 2, 3 to 5 million. It'll go to video or whatever. But he might make his money back, but he could very well, because he produces, I think, his own movies. But he could very well lose his shirt on this movie. Now, he's fabulously rich. He's worth $50 million, I think, more than that. But he probably spent, a good $10 million on this movie, probably 20, something in that range. He could very well lose $10 or $20 million on this movie. Uh-oh, this is one of them stories that'll make you spit your coffee back out on your keyboard. So I'll go ahead and allow you to swallow that last gulp you just took, because you don't want to be taking a drink when I read this next story to you. Are you ready? Here we go. A transgender man used Massachusetts gender law to force women to wax his genitals. Let me say that again for those of you who are laughing. A transgender man used Massachusetts gender law to force women to wax his genitals. I honestly have never heard of anything in my life like such a thing. I'm not aware that men did wax their genitals. Why would you wax your genitals? I've heard about waxing your dolphin, but never about waxing your genitals. Especially when you ask someone else to wax your genitals. It's one thing to wax your own genitals. I don't know, maybe some, go on down to the auto parts store and pick up a can of turtle wax. Soap your pecker down real good. Maybe your testicles. Give them a good rub down on a Sunday afternoon. Listen to some Beach Boys. Drinking some 3-2 beer. I'm just not familiar with anybody ever doing that. Okay? Not that I have a problem with it. I mean, if you want to sit around and, wax your genitals, go right ahead. Kind of reminds me of the old George Carlin joke, where they asked George Carlin, George Carlin asked, why does a dog lick his balls? Because he can. I mean, if I could lick my balls, maybe I would. I don't know. It's not really my style, but maybe it feels good. Hell, I don't know. Never tried to lick my balls, and I don't think I'll try. It's just not something I'm interested in. I probably won't try to wax my balls either. Not sure how well that would go anyhow. But, just so you know, for the male subscribers to this channel, or visitors who may have stopped by, in case you didn't know, you can wax your genitals. And if you live in Massachusetts, you can use gender law to force women to wax your genitals for you. I wonder how that would work out for me here in Ohio. I'm thinking not very well. Maybe I'll walk into the beauty shop. Hi, Margaret. Can I get a ball wax today? Could you wax my testicles? They're a little rough. I like my testicles nice and smooth. Like a walnut. Or is that a buckeye? Buckeyes are nice and smooth. No, walnuts have a very rough surface. That's right. I want my balls to be as smooth and shiny as a walnut. But I live in Ohio, not Massachusetts, so I guess I have no luck. I'll have to walk around with unwaxed testicles. Hopefully you guys feel for me. Probably not a good selection of words. Sorry. Okay. The last few days there's been quite a bit of talk. I've been hearing it. People have been leaving comments in the comments section about this story that's out there. Not that I wasn't interested or don't believe it, just that I was busy covering the other things. And it was kind of out there in the fringe about this thing about Professor Ford being associated with the Central Intelligence Agency, and her father being a former, and some people suggest current, Central Intelligence Agency asset or officer. Don't know if he's actually a company man or an asset of the company. But a very good link was left for me by Baseman or maybe Bassman. I'm not sure Bassman. I'm not sure if you're Bassman or Bassman. I'm not sure if you like to play the bass, boom, 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 or if you like to do some bass fishing. Or maybe you like playing the bass and bass fishing. I don't know. But whether it's Bassman or Bassman, one of our wonderful subscribers, I'm sure you're all familiar with Mr. Bassman or Bassman, he left a very good link. And so if you go to TowerGate Day, let's see, that would be day number 563, TowerGate 563, Bassman or Bassman has left a very good link to more information on this idea about Blasey Ford, Professor Ford, being connected to the CIA, her father being connected. Okay, so it was kind of out there floating around, and that was a pretty good article, pretty good link that was left by Bassman. But then it popped up on a few mainstream sites, Epoch Times, Zero Hedge, a couple more that I look at it, can't remember off the top of my head, but in other words, it's starting to find its way. It's kind of out there on the fringe, 3 or 4 days ago, it's kind of on the fringe. But in the last day or so, it's starting to find its way into the more mainstream. I haven't looked at like Town Hall and Red State and all that stuff, but I don't know if it's made it that far to the mainstream yet, but it's working its way in that direction. And a lot of times you look at the Daily Caller or Gateway Pundit or one of those sites, Truth Feed, those more mainstream type stories, sites that like to run just those quick hitter stories that are popular in the news, the things that are, the top 10, 20 stories. It's generally 3 websites that you would go to where you find those types of stories, like what's happening right now, what's the top 10 stories. That's generally where you find them. So I checked Daily Caller and Gateway Pundit. Really didn't see that story pop up yet as of the time I'm doing this video. But it is out there now, and I expect that it'll be looked into by quite a few different reporters, and we'll get more information whether or not this is factual or whether or not this is just something that's just out there floating around and never really gets confirmed. But let's go through just a few of the detail points. I can't go through it all. It's a pretty long article that Bassman left for me, or you can go read the Zero Hedge article. Plenty out there. You can just Google it, and there's a lot going on with the story right now. So the nuts and bolts, the unwaxed nuts and bolts of this story is that Blasey Ford's father has worked and still works for the Central Intelligence Agency. Ralph Blasey Jr. is his name. And apparently while at the CIA, he worked for National Savings and Trust. Well, that's a name we've all heard before. Like, it's another one of these CIA banks. They do a lot of laundering of all sorts of dirty money for the U.S. government, the CIA, foreign governments. It's like the bank over there in Europe, which is another CIA bank that does a lot of this kind of stuff. So yeah, the CIA does have their own banks, in case you didn't know. So the CIA bank known as National Savings and Trust, and he apparently was one of the head guys there, if not the head guy. Now, of course, this particular bank is known for funding CIA deep state operations. Now, it appears that Professor Blasey Ford's father, Ralph Blasey, knew Dr. Frederick Melges, M-E-L-G-E-S. Mr. Melges, Dr. Melges, Frederick Melges, he helped craft the MK Ultra mind control program for the CIA. Most of you have heard of MK Ultra. It's been out there for many, many years. MK Ultra was essentially, it gets really deep, but I'll just give you the basics. MK Ultra was a program that was generally interested in figuring out how the CIA could manipulate people into doing things, whether it was in the early days, it was about getting a hold of a Russian spy and having some sort of techniques that they could come up with some sort of truth serum. There's been other programs within MK Ultra that try to get control of someone's mind so that you can turn them into essentially a robot. You can essentially take over their mind and get them to do things. A lot of people believed that Sirhan Sirhan was a mind control subject because he met the criteria of a lot of people who are believed to have been mind washed by some intelligence agency. Of course, he was the man who killed, or is alleged to have killed, RFK. So there's a lot of things that go on with MK Ultra, including in the early days they were really focusing a lot on LSD, and they thought LSD was like a truth serum, and they were trying to use it as a truth serum. It never really panned out very well for them, but they've continued to use all kinds of drugs, but also through autosuggestion, putting people into trances, hypnotizing them, and then putting thoughts in their mind, and using these techniques. And there's many documents from MK Ultra where they show proven success in these things. There's one study I read that came out of MK Ultra. This was many years ago, 25 years ago. I read this where they actually had a group of people and they had them sitting in a room and they had like 20 people in there, and they could put this person into kind of a trance and then tell them something like, you are the Statue of Liberty, and they would immediately take on the exact look of the Statue of Liberty, like a statue. They could tell them that their nose was bleeding, and all of a sudden their nose would start bleeding. They could tell them to stand up and dance the jig and do 3 somersaults, and they would do it. So they had strong evidence back in the late 50s, early 1960s of these autosuggestion techniques being very, very effective at mind control, as well as all the drugs and things that they would use to try to take over people's minds. So this is what Mr. Melgus, Dr. Melgus, was doing for the Central Intelligence Agency, and he was apparently very close and had association with Ralph Blasey Jr., the father of Professor Blasey Ford. What's most interesting about this that I found was that this program was being run by the CIA under Dr. Melgus, and it was being run at Stanford University, which is where Mr. Melgus is kind of out of. This was all being done at Stanford University, which is exactly where Professor Ford works. It's also being alleged further that Blasey Ford herself now is the person who oversees the CIA program developed by Melgus. It's being alleged that Blasey Ford is now the person that oversees the CIA program developed by Melgus. There's a story that Melgus at one time took in a homeless woman named Lois Lang. Lois Lang later assassinated a CIA officer named Nick Deek. Deek, of course, was involved in a lot of black money operations with Ralph Blasey Jr., Ford's father. So here we have some very interesting information is what we have. At the very least, it's provoking, thought-provoking, and compelling. Whether or not it's been proven true, I don't know. I imagine there's people trying to verify this, confirm it, because it's out there, and it's out there enough to where mainstream reporters would certainly be hearing about it and may have an interest in looking at it. Some may not. Some avoid these types of stories. They don't like to get into the conspiracy stuff too much for credibility issues. But there will be some other people, maybe Lee Smith, maybe Paul Sperry, some others who might tackle this, and I'll be interested to follow up on it in the days to come. But I guess my thoughts are that there's 3 potential places where this could go, in my mind. Number 1, we find out that this is all BS, and that none of it's true, and that Blasey Ford is no relationship to Ralph Blasey, or that it's a different Ralph Blasey, or that this whole story is false. That's very likely. This whole thing could be just some story that popped up and people jumped on it and propagated it. It's very possible, but it's also very possible that it's true. And if it's true, it raises 2 possibilities, which are very interesting. One possibility would be that if it is true, then possibly Blasey Ford herself, Professor Ford, who we just heard from, the accuser of Brett Kavanaugh, may be a subject of the mind control programs. She could be a subject of the mind control programs, which would explain her bizarre behavior. Because as I said in the video yesterday, or day before yesterday, that watching her in those hearings, she just seems like a complete idiot. Yet she's got 2 advanced degrees. She's a psychology professor. She went to good schools. She grew up in an affluent home. She has all the earmarks of an intelligent person. But watching her in those hearings, she looked like a blooming idiot. She's talking about the time that she was thinking about getting a lawyer, and she said she had to sit, in Walgreens parking lot and do research on how to get a lawyer or something. I mean, come on. Come on. She made herself look like this child almost, very childlike, very naive and childlike. It was just overkill to me. It was just hard for me to believe that she could be that sort of naive and just, it didn't work for me. I don't know. There's just something about her testimony and about her that's just, I don't know. I can't put my finger on it, but it's almost like I feel like she's acting, putting on an act. Now, she may be under mind control. She could be a mind control subject. That is one option. But it's also very possible, of option 2, that she is in fact a practitioner of these things. She heads up the program. She's a teacher of it, a practitioner of it. And that in fact, she wasn't mind controlled. Her mind wasn't taken over, and she was just a robot doing what she was programmed to do by her controllers. But maybe she is one of the controllers herself. Maybe she's one of the puppet masters. Maybe she's one of the people that teaches this and carries out these programs, which would mean that it was all an act, and that she, being very well coached and understanding these techniques very, very well, that she was using the very techniques that she teaches and studies for her appearance there in front of the Senate committee hearing. Very possible that she's on the other end of that stick, and it all was just an act. And being in the mind control business and understanding these things, she would know pretty well how to play it. But all I have to say is that she's a very bad actor, regardless of whether she is a subject and was under mind control through some MK Ultra type program that's being run out there at Stanford, or she's a practitioner of it and a teacher of it, and she was practicing it at the hearing. These are all options that probably should be explored, and I hope they will be. I'll be paying very close attention to it, and I know a lot of you will as well. Thanks so much, Bassman, or Baseman, for that, and for all those of you who commented on this. We'll keep watching it, and we'll see what we find out. So the FBI is now doing their investigation. They've already interviewed, as I understand, 1 or 2 people. They'll eventually, finally, end up interviewing sometime in the next couple days Professor Ford and Judge Kavanaugh again. They'll end up interviewing them. Now, Professor Ford has now gone under oath in a Senate hearing where she was asked a lot of questions and gave answers. So she's now on record under oath. Now, when the FBI interviews her, they'll probably ask her a lot of the same questions, maybe worded differently. They may dig into a few of these other questions, ask some questions about those questions. It is very likely that she will not get her story straight, that she'll make some mistakes, and she won't give the right answers that she already gave under oath and say something different than she said under oath. Don't hold out the impossibility that in the context of doing this investigation, that the FBI finds that Kavanaugh is 100% solid on his testimony, everything is consistent with what he said under oath, but maybe they find some things wrong with the testimony of Professor Ford that are not consistent with the testimony she gave under oath. Wouldn't that be a hoot? Thank you for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow. See ya. Bye.